Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? So we're back around again for some more Wolverine. We finished up the 5-issue series with the tale of the killer robots, but seeing as how this may very well be the apex of Marc Silvestri's career, I don't think we should leave off just yet. I think probably we should enjoy as many of these as we can. So today we're going to take a look at Wolverine number 43. But just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, what you can do is go subscribe on my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do. Helps out the channel, helps to buy new comics. Alright, so yeah, we finished up the storyline with LCD and Albert, who were the killer robots who were assigned to kill Wolverine, but then eventually made friends with him, and now we're all okay. And then that story also culminated in a big battle royal between Logan, Sabretooth, and Cable that first started in the sewers of New York and then finished on board a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. It was a pretty great roller coaster of a story altogether. So you might think after that we would jump right into the next big storyline, but that's not actually what we're going to do in this one. We're going to take a little bit of a breather. This is going to be a one-issue self-contained storyline that'll give us a chance to settle down and sort of situate a couple of things setting up the next story. I think in part that's probably due to this being on the bi-weekly schedule and knowing that Marc isn't going to be able to keep up with 2 issues every fucking month, which is what they're asking. We're going to get 1 issue here, and then a fill-in by somebody else, Larry Stroman, actually. Then another 2 issues by Marc, and then another fill-in by somebody else, then another, and so on. So let's get into this and see what it's all about. Starting with the cover, that is intense. And while I think the original drawing, I think that undoubtedly works very well. I mean, the main reason I think it's intense is probably due to the color. The colors just kind of went off here. From like the 3 or 4 tones for Wolverine and his attacker to the crazy, smeary, kind of Northern Lightsy almost background going on here. That is an extremely striking cover. Probably the best one I've seen since number 38, which is that one there, which is my first Wolverine comic, and I love it. And I just wish I could see what this looked like in black and white. I think that'd be pretty great. All right, so let's open it up. Okay, so this, of course, is going to be written by Larry Hama, breakdowns by Marc Silvestri, and then finishes by Dan Green. Interesting. I did not check the credits, really, before I read this again. I didn't realize Silvestri wasn't doing full pencils here. I did notice that it seemed a bit more solid than usual. So that feels like it's maybe Dan Green kind of, I don't know, hedging his bets. Instead of going his usual fast, sloppy route, maybe taking a bit more time on it just so it looks more finished. And colors, it looks like Glynis Oliver is done with Wolverine for now, so we got Steve Buccellato, who does a pretty good job. Maybe not quite as creative as Glynis, but it still holds up for Wolverine. All right, so we're going to start things off. We're still on the helicarrier. This is shortly after the fight between Logan and Sabretooth that ended with Sabretooth falling out of the helicarrier into the East River. And he's talking to Nick Fury here, of course, head of S.H.I.E.L.D., tells him he's done on the helicarrier and wants to be set down. Nick's just kind of like, dude, we don't set down. This isn't a cab. And Logan goes, I didn't ask you to land. I just, need you to just drop me somewhere. And we get a nice, again, big splash page to start things off with. Always a good idea when starting your comic. It's kind of the equivalent of like the credits montage in like 80s and early 90s movies, where you just kind of set the tone for what you're going to get. And it's a nice shot. It's like nice and dynamic. I guess if you didn't read the previous issue, you don't know exactly what's going on, but it gets revealed pretty quickly in time here. Yeah, there we go. We're on a helicarrier. Everything's good. So yeah, Wolverine, after all that's been going on in the last few issues, Wolverine needs to go for a run. So Jubilee and Forge at first object, saying no, he needs to actually like heal up and stuff and like take a little bit of time off. And Cable kind of backs him up, just like, if he wants to go, let him go. It smells like an old wet sheepdog in here. Which, I mean, I guess Wolverine was rolling around in the sewers with Sabretooth, but I mean, Cable was there too. Stink's not going to go away just because Logan's gone, bud. And of course, Wolverine got all shredded up in the fight. So he's got like minimal clothing, so just borrows like a lab coat from one of the corpsmen that are on board the helicarrier. And he's going to pilfer Fury's stogie on the way out as well. And then, yeah, they get close enough to a roof where he can just jump out and land like a gargoyle. And, yeah, they're off for the rest of the night. And I like everything going on in here. I gotta guess that Sylvestri breakdowns are pretty close to Sylvestri finishes, really. Maybe with just a little bit less rendering. But like these faces all look like the kind of thing we've seen in the previous issues. This figure is pretty great and has that gestural line that Sylvestri does when he's kind of like really cooking. There's all sorts of detail in the background here with all the buildings. Same over here. In fact, I like the shadowing in particular with Logan getting all uplit by the street below. Yeah, it doesn't feel like we're losing any kind of fidelity by Marc not spending more time on the pages. I do think Dan Green might be kind of trying to make sure basically that there doesn't appear to be any fall off between Marc's usual thing and this one. Fuck you, Battletoads. All right, so from there we're cutting to, I guess this is just somewhere downtown in one of the greasier parts of New York. I'm not sure, but I think this might be before New York got cleaned up, when it was like big parts of it were kind of scummy, from what I understand. Kind of how LA used to be. And we got a hooker just kind of, waiting for some business to show up. No Johns, nobody else really in sight at all. And says, business sure ain't dropping out of the sky, that's for sure. And then Wolverine goes and drops out of the sky right beside her. And she's able to give him a light. And he walks off in just a great, wide panel. Well, I guess not wide, but just, opening up the background. Yeah, there's all sorts of background stuff going on. If you look at it, though, a lot of it is done pretty quickly. And I'm not for sure on a lot of this perspective. I assume this is like an awning for a theater. That doesn't necessarily make any sense here. And it's just scribbled on. Love the brushwork on this coat though. Just these thick fucking stripes. And we get a little bit of foreshadowing with the big ad here that you can't really miss for the Hunter in Darkness. He's not named, but I mean, it gets a whole lot of real estate on the page. So you probably know it has some kind of significance. That'll be more of a focus in a couple of issues from now. All right, so from there, we're going to go to under the streets of New York, actually to the Morlock tunnels, where they're investigating some machinery that got broken down in the last issue. Of course, there was all sorts of flooding going on. Mask, who is the leader of the Morlocks, had to redirect the water away from his constituents, which meant redirecting it all to this big old gate here. But of course, that included Wolverine, Sabretooth, Cable, and LCD. And they were getting crushed against the bars, and it eventually had to be ended by LCD detonating her little girl robot body among the gears so that they could all get through. And now, yeah, Mask is just checking out the wreckage here. And it's a pretty convincing wreckage. And they're able to determine pretty quickly that this wasn't a matter of the gate just breaking, which was their original assumption. This was due to an explosion, which Mask confirms because he can smell dead rubber, which he associates with plastic explosive, and figures it must have been pounds of this stuff, around the size of a mid-sized dog or a small child. And at the mention of a child, one of the Morlocks, the Sylvestri Morlocks are interesting in that they're all basically like trolls. There's the odd one that's like a person, but for the most part, no, they're just gigantic hillbilly mutants. But he does notice some pink taffeta among the wreckage, and at that point, the troll Morlocks smell an intruder coming. And yeah, there's some nice lines going on here. It feels like there's a lot of brush in this. I don't know a whole lot from, pen and ink / brush inking. Yeah, it feels like a lot of this is taken over by the brush and then just a little bit of pen nib in between to kind of get some hatching in. Which makes it a lot faster. And it makes for some bolder lines, but it can also make things kind of sloppy and lazy. But I don't think for Dan Green. He does a pretty bang-up job in this. So the guy coming up that the Morlocks smell, they also smell some dead rubber. So they realize it's the guy who destroyed the gate. And turns out it's actually Albert, who of course is the Wolverine doppelganger android. And he's got LCD's head because that's all that's left of her after she detonated her body. And Albert announces on his arrival that he needs power. Mask, of course, immediately misunderstands his meaning and says, yes, we need power too. We crave it and we kill for it. And he sends the big troll Morlocks after Albert, who immediately just guts them both. He's turning into more of a nice android as we go, but he still, I don't think, has much of a conscience. And I imagine this is the kind of thing that would have pissed off Marc Silvestri. Because I know that towards the end of his run with Marvel, he was getting really sick of having to do characters like who, for instance, have knives coming out of their hands, but then I can't draw like the natural repercussions of cutting a dude open with claws that come out of my hands. So I can do the guy's surprise smile, I can do the big swipe, I can do gouts of blood coming, but I cannot show an opening in the guy's chest. And apparently that got under Mark's skin quite a bit. And it's funny because I remember hearing something similar to that at first and thinking it was like an artistic integrity kind of thing. Like, oh, sure, we're all right with him slashing people open and killing them. We're just not showing the blood. But it's all the same thing, really. Like, are we really fooling anybody here? But no, it's really more like, dude, how come I can draw him like slashing at dudes, but I can't draw the incisions down his chest? It's so fucking lame. Anyway, getting back to the comic. We were talking about comic, remember that? So Albert swiftly disposes of the Morlocks and then approaches Mask here and kind of corrects him on what he was originally saying. As I was saying, I need power like fucking amperage. Like a junction box, I need an electronics lab, I need a machine shop, hydraulic tubing. And the reason he needs all this stuff is because the situation that LCD's in, where she's just ahead, is strictly temporary, and eventually she will run out of power. Right now she's being kept alive, essentially on life support. You can see all the wires hanging down from the neck hole. But Albert is going to have to try to build her a new body now. So that's cool. There's some very nice work in here. Like, I like the shot here with Albert approaching with the two Morlock bodies in the back here. This is still a great shot of a little girl's face, even if Mark wasn't doing more detailed penciling. I like this shot here of Mask with the underlighting. And again, just the motion of a shot like this. Like, we're not missing much. Okay, so back to Logan, and Logan is taking a run through the, well, I was going to say the jungle. It's not the jungle. It's actually just Central Park. But that's about as close as he can get in New York, and it'll do for the moment, at least in the middle of the night. So it's just a chance for him to kind of go feral for a bit. And I have to wonder a little bit how often this was addressed before the Larry Hama, Marc Silvestri stuff. I feel like he wasn't that animalistic a lot of the time. I'm sure it got addressed at some point. But it's like a central characteristic of the character in this comic, is that every once in a while he has to go out into the wild and just run around and howl at the moon and shit. I didn't realize there were so many cliffs in Central Park. I guess there must be a few bluffs and like maybe like a mountain or two in Central Park. And after howling at the moon, he hears something howling back, so he's got to go investigate. And again, like, you know, nice close-ups. These are some damn good close-ups of Logan's face here. This is all good stuff. So yeah, Logan arrives at the local zoo, and first thing he notices is just, all these animals in their cages, and they're completely docile. And it's kind of anathema to him at the moment. And then he starts smelling blood, and then all the animals in the zoo also start smelling the blood, and they start going nuts. And of course, he has to stop by the Wolverine enclosure. And we've got to draw some parallels. So, the Wolverine he meets here, it's kept locked up, and it's just given dead meat. It's not given anything to kill, basically, but it's still ready to throw down with anybody who gets too close to the cage. And he notices then that the Wolverine is also bleeding. So that's the source of the blood. And then turns around, and there's this dude, Linus. I think this is pretty much the only time he'll show up in the comic. He might get mentioned once more after this. But this is what Linus likes to do. He likes to go to the zoo after closing hours and torture the animals a bit. And we've all seen John Wick by now. We all know that's a surefire way to get the audience completely against this guy and completely willing to see him get torn apart. So Linus goes to stab Wolverine, stops him with the hand, stabs him right through. Very nice. And then pulls out his backup, which is a revolver, and goes to pull the trigger, but Logan also goes forward with the claws and jams up the barrel with the claws. Which is like, okay, yeah, alright, I guess the bullet wouldn't have room to go all the way through. This is pretty cool with the fist coming up, with the knife sticking through. It's messed up. And yeah, so the gun explodes, knocks him back. We get the cool shot here with like him holding up the claws with part of the barrel left around it. And when Linus stumbles back, he knocks over this cart, which reveals the actual zoo cleaner that he supplanted. So this was Linus's big night to move up from just terrorizing animals to trying to kill humans. Managed with the one. The second one didn't work out so well. And yeah, pulls out the knife and it's immediately healed. Again, good stuff. And yeah, rears back with the claws. Linus is terrified, but he's also drawn to be completely like inbred and subhuman looking. So I don't think too many people are sympathetic at this point. But instead of Logan stabbing him or, slashing at him, he knocks the lock off of the Wolverine cage. And then just, lets the Wolverine do what he wants to do. And Wolverine chases him off into the forest. And Logan kind of gives him some advice here. There's like, better not slow down, Linus. Wolverines ain't nothing if they ain't persistent. There's a lot of good stuff going on here. This hand here is really nice, just the construction of the fingers. This is something I was looking at earlier. Like, okay, I got to try and remember that's what it looks like. Because I feel like I've been having difficulty with that lately. I like this shot here with all the negative space and the no panel border. It does kind of slow things down for a second while the gate swings open and you just get like that whoa of like, oh shit. And then get the Wolverine bursting out of the cage. He's bursting out of the panel border too. And I like the movement going on with the bodies here. With Linus stumbling one way and then the Wolverine just like zooming towards him, just full of purpose. It's good stuff. And at the end here, we're going to get a couple of epilogues. And this seems to be mostly the point, really, of this issue, is to get these things in to set up the next storyline. So we start off with the limousine here with Lady Deathstrike hanging out in the back. And she's seeing all sorts of mention of Logan in the newspaper. Like stealth bomber stolen from Northrop plant. Witness claims hijacker had claws. Aerial dogfight over the East River. And she's trying to figure out where he's going to be. And then we see her check out the paper, the next part with the Hunter in Darkness, which is going to be the next little storyline bit. And of course, Lady Deathstrike was one of the last villains that Logan tangled with before the LCD storyline. Feels like any mutant villain with claws can pretty much be an adversary for Logan, and it'll fit, it'll be appropriate. And yeah, toss the paper out the window. We use that as a transition as the paper falls down into the lake, the East River. And that's when Sabretooth emerges from when he fell out of the helicarrier at the end of the last issue. So we know that he's going to be a problem in the next one as well. And nice close-up on him to end things on as he promises that as long as old Sabretooth can stand on his own 2 feet, that son of mine Logan had better watch out. Because, of course, in the last story, we discovered that Sabretooth at least thinks that Logan is his son. All right. Oh, the Korvac quest is coming up. That was not interesting from what I recall. The Marvel annuals generally in the 90s anyway, the early 90s, kind of sucked. Whatever storyline they were trying for there, usually like nothing happened. I don't think I minded the one from this year that went through Daredevil, Captain America, and Punisher with the Von Strucker gambit. That was it. I kind of like that because, I don't know, there was a different guy in each annual that had to be dealt with. And it felt like each one was suited to that particular annual's hero. But yeah, Korvac quest, from what I recall, kind of sucked. And we get a Wolverine gallery with a shot by Marc Silvestri that I feel like doesn't show up a lot. I thought this was super cool when I first saw it. There's some thick inking going on this, like a lot of really thick brushwork. Particularly around the legs and everything. I wonder how big this drawing is. I feel like it's probably not this large. Although if it is, it's probably done very quickly. All right. So that's it for Wolverine number 43. So yeah, like I said, just kind of a tweener issue, like a breather in between storylines. Just get a little bit of kind of character stuff, just enough to kind of get us through and keep us interested for 22 pages. But the comic looks pretty awesome, even if, unlike what I first thought, Marc Silvestri isn't the full penciler on this. It still looks amazing. Like this whole run on Wolverine, I would say, is probably Marc Silvestri's peak as an artist. And by that, I mean he kind of got to that point where it just seemed like he stopped learning things, or at least stopped looking for things to learn. Because you can see on the Uncanny X-Men videos I'm doing, where he's picking things up as he goes. It's a few years before this, like 2 or 3. But he's still got a lot of tricks that he's still got to learn on the way. And really, even up until like the 260s, When he stops drawing X-Men, he's still picking things up. Right around the Larry Hama run here is where it feels like it all just kind of focuses for him. And I feel like it's probably a combination of, a good character who has some fun action going on, but written into like sturdy stories that are, again, have a pretty fun element. And most importantly, he has to respond to a schedule. Because, I've seen it suggested that his Cyberforce stuff is the best Marc Silvestri stuff. And I have to disagree. I understand by then he's gotten a little more skilled, maybe, technically. And he's putting on more rendering. But I don't think he's as inspired. Not nearly. I think Marc Silvestri is one of those guys who needs a ticking clock in order to produce his best work. I think there's a few guys like that. I would slot Dale Keown and maybe Will Portacio in there with that. You can say Rob, but it doesn't matter because he's just not going to get stuff in on time. And when he does, it's still going to look like he just, didn't bother with a lot of the work. You could also say the same thing about Art Adams in that he won't pay attention to a deadline. But the difference with him is that it's because he will just keep going until he feels like the drawing is done. But like you can see it throughout the entire Wolverine run, where Marc Silvestri is just producing great issue after great issue, sometimes twice in the same month, because he could do that, and then he gets to set his own schedule, and all of a sudden, he doesn't feel like drawing anymore. Books come out, they come out like 2, 3, 4 months late. At first, there's a lot of line work, and then he starts to slack off. He's starting to get his buddies to draw for him, and then he's going to do a new thing. I'm going to do the Darkness now. This is the one that really is speaks to me. It's from my soul. And what does he do? He does like 6, 7 issues of that before he gets bored of that. Like, it just seems to be like, he might disagree with me, but as far as being a comic artist, Marc Silvestri never should have become a millionaire. I think that might be a controversial take if you were to suggest it to him. But he obviously doesn't have the self-motivation to keep producing high-level work. I think he needed like the fear of the impending deadline to really get inspired. And it was just clicking for him here. Anyway, that's a whole lot of just theorizing and supposition. So that's all we're going to do on Wolverine number 43 today. I don't think we'll do number 44, which, as I said, is a fill-in issue. It's written by Peter David and drawn by Larry Stroman, so the X Factor team. But we will pick it up for 45 and 46. And we'll find out all about the Hunter in Darkness, so that'll be a good time. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one, so thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe on my Patreon. It gives you early access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions, and you can join the Blood Force Discord server. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.